Most people think dawn arrives softly, like a curtain being lifted. It doesn't. It breaks. Sudden, startling, splitting the horizon with a blade of pale gold. I was already outside when it happened, boots crunching through cold soil, pruning shears tapping against my thigh. The air smelled of damp oak barrels and the metallic bite of morning frost, the kind that coats every leaf like a warning. Not everything that looks delicate is fragile. I liked that hour. It made sense to me, no questions, no negotiations. No one asking for a piece of what I'd built. My vineyard, 48 acres of stubborn land I had wrestled into beauty, stretched around me like a living cathedral. Even in the half-light, the rows looked orderly, disciplined. I envied them for that. Vines don't apologize for the space they take. People do, or more accurately, people expect you to apologize for the space you take. I had just clipped a stray tendril when I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. Too light to be machinery, too early to be an employee. I knew the rhythm of every footstep on this property. This one I didn't recognize. I turned. Victoria stood at the edge of the row, wrapped in a cream coat far too thin for the morning cold. She looked like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine and into the wrong reality. Her hair was perfectly curled, her nails perfectly pink, and her expression perfectly unbothered by the fact that she was trespassing on a work site at dawn. "Catherine," she said, "I need to talk to you." There it was. The morning's first problem. I wiped my gloves against my jeans. "It's 5 a.m., it's urgent." For anyone else, those words would have meant emergency. For Victoria, they meant one thing: she wanted something, and she wanted it badly. Before I could answer, she held out an envelope. Heavy, cream-colored, embossed. My Vineyard logo printed in gold foil across the front. I froze. I had never seen this envelope before. I had never approved this printing. And I certainly had not given anyone permission to use my business branding. "What is this?" I asked. Her smile twitched, as if trying to decide whether it should be sympathetic or triumphant. "The invitations. They went out yesterday." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. She continued, 280 guests confirmed already. And more coming. People love the idea of a vineyard wedding." My heartbeat shifted, slower, heavier. "And you chose my vineyard?" She blinked as though the question irritated her. "Well, yes, it's beautiful and intimate. And, I mean..." She waved vaguely at the rows behind me. "What else are sisters for?" Something hot tightened behind my ribs. The same old script, the same expectation, the same assumption that everything I worked for was a communal family resource the moment it became valuable. "You sent out invitations," I said carefully, "for a wedding venue you never asked me about." Victoria's eyes sharpened. "Don't make this difficult, Kath. It's family." The sun finally crested the ridge, spilling light over the vineyard. The vines seemed to glow, casting long shadows that made Victoria look like she was standing at the edge of a boundary she didn't even know existed. I stepped forward, close enough to smell her jasmine perfume cutting through the cold. "Victoria," I said, "family doesn't mean take. And this place." I motioned to the land around us, land I'd fought for, bled for, rebuilt from the dirt up, "is not yours to give away." Her expression faltered, just for a second, then smoothed. "Well," she said, opening her coat and pulling out a second stack of envelopes, "it's a little late for that." The wind changed direction. A sign, maybe. Because in that moment, I understood something chillingly simple. This wasn't a request, this was an ambush. And dawn or not, I was already in the middle of a battle I hadn't agreed to fight. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Back in the tasting room, I laid it on the counter the way one might lay down an unfamiliar weapon, carefully as if it might go off. The early light filtered through the high windows, painting the bottles in amber streaks. My vineyard usually felt like armor around me. This morning, it felt compromised. "You should have told me," I said. Victoria trailed behind, clicking across the hardwood floors like she was entering a boutique, not a working winery. She set her stack of invitations beside mine, neat and smug. There wasn't time to wait. Dates were filling up everywhere. "And you're my sister. It was obvious you'd say yes. Obvious." I leaned my palms against the counter. The wood was cool, grounding. obvious to who? You never asked. She sighed dramatically, the way she always did when reality didn't match the fantasy she'd already committed to. Catherine, come on. You barely use the outdoor terrace in October. You said yourself it's your slow season. I said it's my shoulder season, I corrected. That's not the same as unused. My words didn't land. They rarely did with her. But something else did. Her eyes flicked away for a beat too long. A crack. An opening. You printed these invitations, I said slowly, with my Vineyard branding. My logo. Without permission. It's a wedding, not a corporate takeover, she snapped. You're being dramatic. I laughed short and cold. And you sent them to, what did you say, 280 people? 280 confirmed, but more will please reply soon. She hesitated. It might be closer to 400. But that's fine, people can stand. It's not like they'll be stomping grapes. My stomach dropped. 400 people, on soft soil, in harvest-adjacent season. The risk alone, damage to vines, liability exposure, alcohol permit complications, was enough to make my pulse spike. But beneath that was something sharper, older, the realization that my sister still didn't see me. Not as a person, and certainly not as a business owner. She saw a resource, a convenience, a prop. Why didn't you book an actual venue? I asked. She hesitated again. Long enough to confirm there was something she didn't want to say. Because, she finally whispered, no one was giving us a discount. There it was. There it always was. Not love. Not sentiment. Not a sisterly dream of celebrating surrounded by my vines, money. A shortcut disguised as family bonding. And you assumed I'd give you one, I said. You have the space, she said defensively, folding her arms. And it would be good exposure for you. People with money will be here. Influencers, photographers, there'll be tags, posts. This is my business, Victoria, not your backdrop. She flinched a little, like the word backdrop hit her harder than I intended. But I didn't take it back. It was accurate. My phone buzzed. A text from Javier, my Vineyard manager. Did you authorize a site visit for wedding vendors at 9 a.m.? There are trucks at the gate. My blood went cold. Vendors? Already? I turned the screen toward her. She didn't look surprised. You didn't, I whispered. I had to, she said quickly. We needed to lock in the florist and caterer. They had to see the space to visualize the layout. You weren't answering your phone. Because it was 5 a.m. It was urgent, she repeated, exasperated. I stared at her. You made bookings in my name? Well, yes, technically, but only because they needed a venue contact and you never pick up before noon? I closed my eyes. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a bad assumption. This was deliberate, a cascade of decisions made for me, around me, behind me. Each one designed to make refusal harder. The invitations, the logo printing, the vendors already on site. She hadn't come to ask. She had come to inform. This isn't how family treats each other, I said quietly. Victoria's jaw tightened. You act like you're the only one who works hard. You have this place, you have success. Mom always said you should share it. The words landed like a slap. There it was, the ghost beneath everything, our mother's expectations, spoken lightly but obeyed fiercely. The old family myth that my achievements owed something to everyone else. That independence was selfish. That boundaries were betrayal. Get out, I said. Victoria blinked. What? I need to deal with the vendors you brought onto my property without consent. And I can't do that with you here. Her face crumpled, not fully into guilt but into wounded entitlement. You're making this a lot harder than it needs to be. I'm protecting my livelihood. She scoffed. From me? Yes, I said. From you. A beat of silence. Heavy, unavoidable. Then she gathered her coat, stiffened her spine, and marched out the door. The envelope remained on the counter, gold logo gleaming like an accusation. The sun was fully up now, and the day had only just begun. By the time I reached the gate, 3 trucks idled along the gravel road, engines rumbling like beasts waiting to be fed, a catering van, a floral delivery truck, and, God help me, a portable stage rental. Their drivers stood in a small cluster, clipboards in hand, chatting with each other as if they were early for a music festival. Javier jogged toward me, breath frosting in the cold. Boss, he said, lowering his voice. They said they're setting up for a walkthrough. They have a work order with your vineyard listed. My name, my address, my business, weaponized without my consent. Let me see it, I said. The caterer handed me a binder. Inside was a layout: tables, buffet tents, serving stations. No exaggeration, it looked like they were preparing to feed a small country. The floral team had sketches of towering installations designed to sit between my oldest, most delicate vines. And the stage company, good God. They were planning to drive machinery into a restricted area where the soil was soft as sponge cake. My jaw locked so tightly it hurt. Who gave you permission to come? I asked, keeping my voice even. The stage operator shrugged. Bride's sister. Said she owned the place. Catherine Linden, right? A leaden silence fell between us. I'm Catherine, I said. Their faces changed instantly. Confusion first, then something like alarm. I closed the binder and handed it back. No one is setting foot past this gate without my written authorization. That includes all of you. The caterer raised both palms. We're not trying to cause trouble, but there are deposits. Deadlines. Canceling now is going to cost the bride. Then the bride, I said, shouldn't have booked a venue she didn't own. Their eyes widened. None of them wanted a fight. They just wanted their signatures and checks. Unfortunately, the checks had my name on them, attached to a lie. Pack up, I said, all of you. Grumbling, confusion, a few sympathetic glances. Trucks began reversing slowly, tires crunching over gravel. As the last van pulled away, the vineyard exhaled. The quiet felt like a temporary armistice. Javier turned to me, rubbing the back of his neck. You want security on site today? I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I could handle my own family. But the truth was settling into my bones like a storm front. If Victoria had moved this far without asking, she would move further. I nodded. Call them. I went straight to my office, a room lined with vintage wine maps and the soft hum of a single space heater. The invitations were still in my hand. The gold foil logo seemed to pulse under the light. Then the door burst open, not a knock, not a pause. My mother swept inside, hair pinned, coat still buttoned, breathing like she'd run all the way from town. You embarrassed your sister, she said before the door even closed. I blinked. Excuse me? She just called me sobbing. You humiliated her in front of the vendors. You turned them away without warning. I counted to 3, then 10. It didn't help. She trespassed, I said. She impersonated me. She made bookings in my name. My mother dismissed the facts with a flick of her hand. It's her wedding, Catherine. She panicked. You know how she gets. She lied, I said. And you're defending her. She wouldn't have had to lie if you weren't so rigid. The air between us snapped like a taut wire. For years, this was the script. Victoria the fragile one, Victoria the dreamer, Victoria whose mistakes were just her nature, and me, the older sister, required to absorb every blow in silence. But something in me broke loose. I'm not rigid, I said. I'm responsible. There's a difference. She bristled. We're family. Family shares. Family asks, I said. Family respects each other's livelihoods. Family doesn't treat a working vineyard like a free event space. Her expression hardened. You've changed. No, I said. I've stopped apologizing. A beat of stunned silence passed, my words hanging between us like a boundary drawn in fresh ink. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out something I wasn't expecting. A contract. Not mine. Victoria's, pre-signed, predated, a full event agreement written as if someone had already secured my approval. My stomach dropped. You were supposed to sign this yesterday, my mother said quietly, before she sent the invitations. My pulse roared in my ears. She hadn't just assumed I'd say yes. She had planned my yes for me. I stared at the contract, then at my mother, and felt the ground shift beneath everything I thought was salvageable. This wasn't just Victoria's doing, this was orchestrated. And I was the last to know. The contract my mother placed on my desk sat like a block of ice, solid, unforgiving, cold enough to burn. It was printed on thick paper, the kind used for prestige deals and real estate closings, not family events. Someone had spent time crafting this. Someone had rehearsed the presentation. Someone had counted on my compliance. I didn't agree to this, I said, voice low. But you will, won't you? my mother replied, her tone deceptively gentle. For your sister. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the space heater. The quiet was suffocating. No, I said. Her shoulders tightened. Don't make this difficult. I pushed the contract back toward her. You already made it difficult. A flicker of anger crossed her face, brief but unmistakable. You always overreact. Always. Even as a child. I almost laughed. That was the thing about my mother. Whenever cornered, she retreated into nostalgia. Childhood sins repurposed as justification for present demands. I'm not overreacting, I said. I'm refusing to be exploited. Her eyes narrowed. Such an ugly word. It fits. She took a slow breath, smoothing her coat as if bracing herself. Catherine, listen. Victoria is under pressure. The date is set. The guests have booked hotels. The guests, I cut in, are here because you two invited them using my property as the venue. My mother's lips thinned. If you refuse to cooperate, you'll ruin the wedding. I stared at her, really stared. Somewhere in her expression, under layers of entitlement and tradition, there was something else. Fear. Not fear of me or the vineyard. Fear of appearance. Fear of gossip. Fear of her perfectly curated world wobbling even a degree off balance. You put me in an impossible position, I said. No, she corrected softly. You put yourself in one. By being stubborn. That word, stubborn. It was the family code for, you're not obeying the role we assigned to you. My chest felt tight. You need to leave. She didn't move. Victoria won't forgive you for this. Then she won't forgive me, I said, feeling something inside me settle, quiet, steady, resolved. But I'm not signing. At last my mother turned to go. Her heels echoed sharply down the hallway, each tap like a countdown. The moment the door shut, I sank into the nearest chair. My hands shook, not from fear but from the realization of just how carefully they had choreographed my compliance, right down to a pre-dated signature line. They thought they knew me well enough to predict my obedience. But they underestimated the woman the vineyard had forged. Someone who had learned, season by season, that pruning is necessary for survival. The escalation began immediately. By noon, my phone was vibrating non-stop. Calls, texts, voicemails. Aunt Lydia, sweetheart, reconsider. You're hurting your mother. Cousin Bianca, why can't you be generous for once? My father, just sign the paper. It's one day. Victoria, 36 missed calls. And then the messages from unknown numbers. Why are you ruining the wedding? We've already flown in. This is vindictive. I stood behind the tasting room bar, gripping the edge until my knuckles went white. The sheer volume of pressure was crushing, wave after wave. But beneath it all was an odd clarity. The louder they became, the more certain I felt that I was right to resist. Still, the barrage left hairline fractures. Even strong stone breaks if struck enough times. Javier found me staring out the window at the vineyard, the vines trembling in the afternoon breeze. You okay? He asked. No, I said honestly. He nodded. Security team's here, 5 guards. They'll monitor entry points. Good. I exhaled. God, I hate that it's come to this. He hesitated. The real problem won't be the guests. I looked at him. What do you mean? He lifted his chin toward the end of the drive. A line of cars had begun to form. Early arrivals, curious relatives, maybe even vendors checking for updates. Men and women stepping out, squinting at the vineyard like it was a contested territory. Javier murmured, Your family's building an army. A chill tore through me. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, a new message arrived. From Victoria. Not a tearful voicemail, not a manipulative plea, a single photo, her wedding dress, hanging in my barrel room. My breath caught. She had broken in, or someone had let her in. She had placed her dress, the most symbolic object in her universe, in the most sacred place in mine. A message, a threat, a claim. And with it, a caption. Too late to back out now. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with the realization that we had officially crossed a line neither of us could uncross. The climax was coming, and the vineyard, my sanctuary, was about to become a battlefield. The morning of the supposed wedding broke like a bruise, heavy sky, sharp wind, a strange stillness that made the vineyard feel like it was holding its breath. I walked the rows at dawn, boots dragging through damp soil. My fingers brushed the vines as if checking their pulse. They felt alive, alert, bracing. The calm lasted roughly 12 minutes. Then the first car appeared. A sleek black sedan rolled slowly up the drive, headlights slicing through the mist. Then a second, a third. By the time the sun crested the ridge, the line stretched down the hill like a metallic serpent. Relatives in rented tuxes, college friends in pastel dresses, influencers holding ring lights. An entire ecosystem of expectations converging on a place they believed was theirs. Security moved into position. I steadied myself. Then the music started. A DJ, one I had explicitly turned away, had set up outside the gate, blasting an upbeat instrumental track meant for a bridal entrance. The bass thudded through the stillness, vibrating against the metal fence. "Are they serious?" Javier muttered beside me. "Yes," I said, my voice flat. "Completely." And then she arrived. Victoria stepped out of a white limousine, as if emerging from a dream. Her gown shimmered in the gray light. Lace, beadwork. A train so long it looked like a tidal wave of fabric swallowing the gravel. Her makeup was immaculate. Her smile was weaponized. She knew exactly what she was doing. She walked straight toward the gate. "Open it," she said to security, not even glancing at me. The guard shook his head. "We need the venue owner's approval." For the first time she looked at me. "Catherine," she said, voice soft and trembling, "don't do this." Something inside me cracked, not a breaking but a spreading fissure of grief. Because in another world, another childhood, another family, this could have been a joyful day. I could have been proud. I could have let her in. But that world didn't exist. And she hadn't left me a choice. "You brought hundreds of people here against my permission," I said. "You lied, you forged, you trespassed." Her eyes shone, not with remorse but fury. "I'm your sister, and this is my land," I replied. "You don't get to claim both." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted, cameras zoomed. Then Victoria made her move. She grabbed her dress in 2 fists and stepped toward the fence. No hesitation, no calculation. Just raw entitlement wrapped in silk. She latched onto the chain links, slipping her foot into the lowest rung. "Open it," she hissed again. "I'm getting married today." Security moved fast. Gently but firmly they blocked her. Her heel snagged, her veil tore. Gasps echoed. Someone screamed. She turned on me, face contorted. "You're ruining my wedding!" "You ruined it yourself," I said quietly. The words were a match. She exploded. "You hate that I'm happy. You always have. You think this vineyard makes you better than us, but it doesn't. It just made you selfish." The crowd waited, hungry, eager, for my response. For drama. For spectacle. But I didn't give them what they wanted. Instead, I looked directly at Victoria, letting the truth settle between us like dust. "I don't hate that you're happy," I said. "I hate that you believe your happiness requires my destruction." Silence. Then, slowly, the first car in the line reversed. Then another. The DJ lowered the volume. People whispered, checked their phones, consulted each other. The spell broke. They weren't soldiers, they were guests without a venue. Their loyalty was shallow, their patience thinner than her veil. One by one they began to leave. Victoria watched them, disbelief warping her features. "Come back!" she shouted, her voice cracking. "We can fix this, she'll let us in, just wait!" But no one waited. The limousine pulled forward to retrieve her, but she didn't move. She stood in the middle of the road, dress pooling like spilled milk, staring at the place she thought would be hers. "It was supposed to be perfect," she whispered. I swallowed hard. "It still could have been, if you had asked." Her eyes met mine, wide, wet, lost. And for the first time, I saw something real beneath all the theatrics. Fear. Not of losing a wedding, of losing control. Security cleared the road. Guests dispersed, the music died. And finally, with a sound that was half sob, half scream, Victoria gathered her ruined train and climbed into the limousine. The door slammed shut, the vineyard exhaled. I stood in the quiet aftermath, heart pounding, realizing something I'd never let myself say out loud before. This wasn't the day I defended my land. This was the day I saved myself. The afternoon after the failed wedding settled into an uncanny quiet, like the vineyard was trying to decide whether to mourn or breathe again. The sky had cleared into a washed-out blue, and the vines trembled gently in the breeze. oblivious to the storm of voices and footsteps that had thundered across the gravel just hours earlier. I wasn't oblivious. I felt every echo of it, the shouts, the betrayal, the hurt threading through the silence like a hairline fracture. But I also felt something else, something steadier, a kind of internal stillness that I hadn't known I needed. By evening, security had left. The gate was shut. The road was empty except for a few stray petals and a dropped bobby pin glittering near the curb. Remnants of a wedding that never was. I walked the rows as golden hour draped the vineyard in warm light. The vines cast long shadows, reaching across the soil like dark fingers. I touched the nearest trunk gently. It held firm. "Still here," I whispered, as if the land needed the reminder. Back in the tasting room, the voicemail icon blinked red. I pressed play. Aunt Lydia, my father, Uncle Raymond, half the extended family. Some messages were furious, others guilt-soaked. A few, quiet, ashamed, said they never wanted to be involved in the drama to begin with, but none of them surprised me. The last message, though, that one stayed in my chest. It was my mother. Her voice was soft, shaking in a way I'd never heard. "Catherine, I don't know what happened today. Your sister, she's inconsolable." A pause. "I suppose we all are." Another pause, longer this time. "You should have just agreed. It would have saved everyone pain." Then, quieter. "But maybe I pushed you too hard." The message ended without a goodbye. I stared at the phone for a long time before setting it down. The truth was simple. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to mourn the narrative she'd built. One where I was the reliable daughter who said yes. Where Victoria was the golden one who never heard no. Where boundaries didn't exist, because women in our family weren't supposed to have them. But that story wasn't mine anymore. 3 days later, I found Victoria's wedding dress. It was still in the barrel room, where she'd hung it like a hostage. The fabric was flawless, untouched by the chaos. For a moment I just stood there, listening to the soft mechanical hum of the temperature control system. The dress looked lonely, not because it had been abandoned, but because it had never belonged here in the first place. I knelt, unhooked it carefully and laid it over my arms. The beads caught the dim light like dew. For a second, my throat tightened. Not with regret, not with guilt. With grief. For the sisterhood we never had. I left the dress folded in a garment bag at the gate with a note. This deserved a better beginning, so did we. No signature. Later, a car came for it. I didn't watch. Weeks passed. The harvest came in clean, untouched, unharmed, vibrant. Reporters reached out after a few guests posted confused snippets online. A wedding that never happened. A bride at a locked vineyard. Rumors of lawsuits. I ignored them all. The story wasn't theirs to tell, but one email slipped through. A small wine magazine asking to feature the vineyard. Not because of drama, because of the year's remarkable crop and the subtle shift in flavor my vintner's notes had captured, a deeper earthiness, a surprising steadiness. "Your vines seem more resilient this year," the editor wrote. I smiled at that. Resilience has a way of seeping into everything. My father visited once, unannounced. He stood at the edge of the terrace like a man approaching a confession booth. "You held your ground," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how much you'd grown." "You never asked to know," I replied, not bitter, just honest. He nodded. True. We stood together for a moment, looking out at the vineyard. The silence between us wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either, something in between, something possible. When he left, I didn't feel lighter, but I felt understood. Maybe that was enough. The vines entered dormancy as winter arrived. Bare canes, tight buds, a promise of return hidden beneath stillness. In that quiet season, I found myself waking early not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. The land felt loyal, steady, mine. One night, standing alone on the terrace, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the pressure, the breaking, the reclamation, and I understood something I never had before. Boundaries do not sever love. They reveal it, they protect it. They make room for what deserves to remain. I watched the moonlight spill across the rows. The vineyard, my first rebellion, my longest commitment, glowed silver, and I knew with a certainty as deep as rootstock, I had not lost a family. I had shed an illusion. What grew back would be honest. What grew back would be mine.